25th meeting of the Des Moines Park and Recreation Board will come to order, please. Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Galloway?
Yes.
Gill?
Present.
Ogle?
Present.
Bacto?
Present.
Nolan?
Present.
Cahill?
Here.
Bassick?
Yep.
George?
Yes.
Scavo?
Here.
Thornton?
Here.
Feltner?
Here.
Rogers?
Here.
We have a quorum, and let the record reflect that Dan Passick is participating by phone because of an illness in the family. Now next, let's turn to the agenda. Because Dan's time is limited and also someone else needs to leave, I would propose moving the board action items up to the front right after the minutes, so that we can get votes on those and then have the director's report follow the board action items. Is that okay with everybody?
So moved.
All those in favor of the agenda as amended say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amended agenda is approved. And also let me make a comment. It's been my honor and privilege to have been associated with Carol George for over 8 years on this board, and she's taking her victory lap tonight. So we're sending around a little thank you. And since Carol has been such an above and beyond the Call of Duty Park Board member, being on committees, I couldn't even begin to number all the committees and extra things she's done. We're giving her something a little bit extra special, above and beyond what people normally get, so that's the reason for that. And when we get all done, we'll say a few more words at the end of the meeting, so. Anyway,
Thank you.
enjoy your victory lap, Carol. Okay. Now let's talk about the minutes of the May 28th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any changes, additions, comments, questions about the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes of the May meeting are approved. Okay, now we'll move on to the board action items. A is the election of the slate of officers. And I will turn the floor over to Vicki Facto with the report of the nominating committee.
The nominating committee made up of Chairman Galloway, myself, and Mary Gold would like to recommend for the executive committee as chair, Susan Nolan, as vice chair, Lloyd Ogle, and executive officers, Paula Feltner, Susan Koenig Vandahar, and Dick Thornton.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. Are there any nominations from the floor for any of those positions? Okay, seeing that there are no other nominations from the floor, is it okay if we just vote on this as a package deal? One vote for the entire slate? Does anybody object to that?
Need a second or anything?
Okay, so in light of that, let's have a motion and a second to approve the entire slate. So we'll make a motion. Any further discussion before we vote? Questions or discussion? We're voting on the entire slate all at once, just as described by Vicki. Are we ready to vote? Last call? Okay, Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Galloway?
Yes?
Gill?
Yes.
Ogle?
Yes.
Bacto?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Cahill?
Yes.
Bassick?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Scavo?
Yes.
Feltner?
Yes.
Rogers?
Yes.
It is unanimously approved. So congratulations to the new slate of officers. So we'll give them a round of applause. Our best wishes for the coming year. You'll be in good hands. Okay, now comes what I believe will be an easy one. Item B for board action. Appointments to the Susan Golf Committee. Does somebody want to, Ben, do you want to describe what's going on here?
I'd actually ask Matt Salvatore, who recently took over the staff oversight of that committee, to make his way up and just talk about, we have 2 new appointments, as well as we are just officially having Vince show up on this document too as the park board member that would replace Carol on the golf committee.
Yeah, Chairman Galloway, members of the Park and Recreation Board. I'm Matt Salvatore, interim recreation manager. We have 2 new appointments for starting July 1. Linda Flaherty and Kathy Stachin. They're going to be 2-year appointments rather than the standard 3-year appointments, so we have a staggered of terms. That way not everyone's coming off all at once. So, any questions?
Okay, and maybe this question is for Ben, but the appointment of Vince to the golf committee, that's going to be handled as an appointment by the chair, is that correct? As opposed to a vote?
Yes.
So that will occur at the end of the agenda then, am I right?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
The chair appoints to your committee, so. We just wanted to have it, a new practice for us is we thought it would be good just to have the records reflect. It does a couple of things. It does show that we had a transparent process, but it also shows us we can go back and find dates when people started in case we lose a file regarding term limits. So it's really helpful to us as staff, as a management tool. Something we've never done before in the past with you as park board members on these 4 ad hoc, or these 4 committees that we have that are official.
And to kind of finish off the subject, since we're talking about it, the appointment of the Carolyn Rogers to the cemetery committee will follow the same scenario. In other words, it's an appointment by the chair, which we'll handle at the end of the agenda here.
Perfect.
Okay, any other questions about appointments of citizens to the cemetery committee? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Anything further? Are we ready to vote? Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Galloway.
Yes.
Gelb.
Yes.
Vogel.
Yes.
Pacto.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Cahill.
Yes.
Passick.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Scavo.
Yes.
Thornton.
Yes.
Feltner.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
It is approved. Next, we'll move on to board action. Item C, to set the date of hearing for naming the enclosed shelter at Greenwood Park. And I'll let Ben talk about this, but I want to emphasize, all we're doing now is setting a date. We're not actually voting on the merits of who to name it for, but we're just setting a date of hearing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Absolutely, thank you. This is exactly like you've done recently with the Reno Dog Park as well as the Ding Darling Shelter House at Berlin Park. We do have a donor that's a former park board member, current member of the Friends of Des Moines Parks Foundation, that has made a substantial donation to our department and has worked with us to develop where that might go, and that is at the Greenwood Park shelter. There's a shelter right now that's open air. It's at the top of the hill by the wading pool on your way to the old Science Center, which is now the Academy School. In return, she's asking that you name that shelter in honor of her son that recently passed away. Not recently, but passed away in the last 10 years, excuse me. So that'll be your hearing. It'll be your official mechanism to consider that and invite the public in to have their comments as well as your official reaction. As you recall too, I'll just add that the shelter program has increasingly had more of a need. We've done a lot of shelter presentations for you. You can see the needs have been in the 1,300 to 1,400 number of rentals per year for open and enclosed shelters combined. So this is a great need that we have in our department to have more nicely renovated enclosed shelters.
So the date would be, is proposed to be July 31st.
Yeah, your next park board meeting, July 31st. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
So just to clarify, what we're voting on is to designate the next park board meeting, which, by the way, is July 31st, as our date of public hearing for this matter. Are there any other questions, comments, discussion? Are we ready to vote? Okay, Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Galloway.
Yes.
Gelb.
Yes.
Vogel.
Yes.
Pacto.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Cahill.
Yes.
Passick.
Yes.
George.
Yes.
Scavo.
Yes.
Thornton.
Yes.
Feltner.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
It is approved. Next, we'll move on to the last voting item, item D, the Park Signage Ad Hoc Committee recommendation. And I'd like to say a few words first to kick this off. A famous scientist said once that predictions are very difficult, especially when they concern the future. And it's hard to predict the future, but anyway, here's my fearless prediction, that if we approve this today, and I hope you do, that when we look at this a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, that probably there won't be any signs at all put up. So if you're against signs, I think approving this is probably the way to get to that point. But no signs will be the result. And if that's the result you want, I think that would be something to consider. Now, why do I say that? Let me give you an example. Remember a year or two ago, we had a long discussion about the camping ordinance. There was the Occupy movement, and then afterwards there was a lot of meetings and committee work on creating a camping ordinance for Des Moines. And everybody was passionate about that. Everybody had ideas about what parks are we going to allow camping in, how many tents in a park, how many square inches in a tent, how many people in a tent, where in the park is it going to be, how many nights can people stay in a park, how many nights can they stay in all parks within town, how many nights can a park be used by any number of people, and on and on and on, all sorts of concerns. And we did that, and after a couple of camping seasons have gone by, here, guess what? Not a single person has applied for a camping permit. Not a single one. So after all that wailing and gnashing of teeth and angst, nothing happened. And it's my prediction that the same thing will happen here if we approve this proposed sign ordinance. But suppose I'm wrong. Suppose there is one or two of these signs that do get put up. That's sure a lot better to have this kind of sign than, for instance, what we saw proposed by the Meredith Neighborhood Association, at least in my opinion. So even if, in the worst case scenario, some of these signs do go in, and I don't think they will, but if they do, it's a lot better than the alternative. So I think that would be something to consider if you haven't decided how you're going to vote yet. And also, I want to commend Ben for doing a very good job in coming up with this proposal. Even people who are against it have said, Ben, you did a really good job in threading the needle and getting the committee to approve this, and getting the Des Moines neighbors to approve it. And I might mention on the committee that approved it, we had 2 council people, Chris Coleman and Bob Mahaffey. And getting all those people to agree that this was something that they could support, that by itself is a great achievement, even if you don't like the idea. But if you're not decided how to vote, and you're looking for a tiebreaker in your decision, I'd certainly encourage you to consider giving Ben the benefit of the doubt because of the great job he did, and give him some support when he goes to the city council. And one final word. At our last meeting, there was a lot of concern about the donors who would have their names on the sign or not have their names on the sign. A lot of people were concerned about First Amendment issues and inconsistencies and so forth. My view is I could care less who's a donor, who's not a donor. I can vote for this proposal, or if it was some other proposal, I could vote for that. But if that's the only thing you're concerned about, is the car dealers are allowed versus 4-H club or something like that, if that's what is really holding you up, and otherwise you're supportive of the proposal, I'd say, well, let's break it down into 2 parts. Let's cast a separate vote on the donor list on the sign, and then vote on the rest of it, if that's not objectionable to you. So if there's somebody in that category where you support the idea generally, but you're just bothered by this donor question, let me know and we can break it down into 2 separate parts. So there's no point in having the whole thing go down in flames if you're just worried about one little part. But anyway, that's what was on my mind, and I wanted to give you the benefit of my thinking, and I'll just turn it over for discussion to the board. Anybody want to go first?
Who was that wise old?
Richard Feynman, Feynmann, the famous physicist.
Well, I have a problem with I still have a problem with the sign ordinance as it relates to the signs and, for example, you could have Harley Davidson, I just think there's certain parts of it that don't fit. And I understand your comparison with the Occupy situation, And I, for one, at that point in time said, let them do whatever they want to do. Ultimately, they're going to go away. But, I also agree with Lloyd's constitutional problem, and after looking at what the U.S. Supreme Court did today, someone, somewhere, is going to challenge the sign ordinance even more. And, rather than trying to do some more to get it in line with some of our thoughts, I think the whole thing at that point in time could go down. But I still have objections because of the situations I talked about before, and they remain. So the opponents say it's not.
I guess I'd would make a few comments, and I've been vocal on this. First of all, I want to make clear that, and I'm sure I speak to anyone that would vote against this, that just because we vote against this, Joe, is in no way a lack of support for Ben or the job he's doing. And so I don't think the vote, a yes vote or no vote, either one should be an indication of support or lack of support of the job that Ben and the city staff have done on this issue. So I really don't think that should be an appropriate consideration on this vote. This issue, and I also agree in some sense it's maybe a little bit of a mountain over a molehill. My guess is whether or not we vote yes or no on this is probably not going to have any impact one way or the other, whether there's signs or not. But assuming we want to have the structure in place that, it's before us, we last time voted 14-0 against this recommendation. And so I thought when folks were going to get together and discuss this, that some of the concerns of the Park and Rec Board were going to be addressed. And really, what all I saw happen is they basically flushed out the original idea. There was no compromise. These signs are still 24 feet in height. They dwarf any of our signs for our parks. So that's a major concern I have that's not been addressed, is the size of these signs. They're going to allow 24-foot high signs in our parks. Theoretically, every neighborhood association that borders a park is going to be able to have one of these signs up. You have at least 2 parks that have got 3 neighborhood associations associated next to them. You've got a whole bunch that have 2.
Yeah, Lloyd, just for a moment, the height is just, I don't want to correct you, but the height is 24 square feet, so as high as they can go is about 8 foot.
Okay.
Just to make sure, I don't want the public to hear that incorrect.
I don't think the square footage should be any greater than what we have in our square footage for the signs for the park itself. I don't think there should be signage in the parks that's even bigger than the signs for the park itself. So I really didn't believe what came back was, what was come back to Park and Rec was much of a compromise. The issue of the donor thing, and I understand, if you want to limit certain types of donors to certain type of activities, you need to have an articulated rational basis for it. I've yet to hear that rational basis. I understand the idea that the city has a right to limit certain types of advertising, but no one's explained to me why is it fair to have a car dealership to have signage or norm recognition and an individual can't, a 4-H club can't, a church can't. So no one's articulated why. I just don't even like the wording in that section of the ordinance, and I don't think that it's appropriate. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's we're here to give the city council our opinion on something. Quite frankly, I don't think it was a good idea originally. I still don't think it's a good idea, so I'm going to vote against it, and I encourage my fellow board members to do the same. If a majority does vote against it, I think one of us should probably show up and explain why. But again, in particular, I'm still concerned about the allowance for the size of these signs, and I don't think the restrictions on individuals or nonprofits from being on a signage as a donor makes any sense to me, and those are the main reasons I'm opposed to this. I'd also make a point that if no ordinance is put in effect, the practical matter is if someone wants to put a sign in the park, they got to go before the Board of Adjustment and get a variance on an ordinance. That's not a simple thing to do. Every single request for a variance is going to require a staff recommendation from zoning staff. And I would be shocked that zoning staff would not call up Ben Page and get their opinion and probably have it scheduled to come before this board to look at and have an opinion prior to any Board of Zoning action. So I'm not afraid that by not having an ordinance in place that we're just going to see signs willy-nilly of all different types and sizes on park and rec space. I still think that park staff and this board would be involved in any proposal to put a big sign on park property, whether we have an ordinance in place or not. So I do agree. I think it's time to, we've battered this around for so long. I'm ready for that vote and to move on. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Marion?
Well, I feel like I need to comment and because I do believe whether we pass this or not potentially could make a difference as to what kinds of signs end up in our park system. I think the board sent the message initially that we're not excited at all about any signs in our parks. But if we don't pass something, and I think this is a good compromise personally, then I think we could potentially have this sign issue keep coming back to be revisited on a case-by-case basis. Whether it has to go through, the city, whatever that zoning committee is, which may not be easy, but is possible to have done. This ordinance, in my opinion, is important because it puts the park system, the parks department, in control over what can and cannot go into the park system as a sign. Are they too big? Yes, I agree. Does the neighborhood have to get this kind of a sign? No. This would not preclude them from getting those smaller signs that are allowed to go on existing right-of-way poles or whatever. So neighborhoods will have an opportunity to be recognized whether they can raise the $7,000 to $9,000 to get a monument sign like this or not. But that's sort of irrelevant to me. What is most important to me is that we maintain as much control over what happens in our park system as possible. And this ordinance, though not perfect, I agree, there are donor issues, and frankly, if that's an issue, separate it. Although I know from executive committee and talking to Ann that legal staff has looked at this, and the challenges are always possible, but I think they've done their due diligence and they feel comfortable with the language that's here, which is basically an attempt to remain neutral as much as possible. But that's not perfect. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, because we want control of what happens in our parks. This ensures that we have control, that we don't have to deal with things on a case-by-case basis as they come up in the future. We've got a policy. We have an ordinance. We can follow it. And that ordinance gives Ben discretion in terms of if it is going to be in the park, where is it going to be? What's it going to look like? And then we can continue with our branding and we continue with consistency in our park system. So I think we need to pass this. And if the donor issue is a big issue to you, then I think Joe's idea of separating that out is brilliant. And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Marion.
Can we separate out the size of it as well?
It's a free country. We can have anybody propose any kind of an amendment.
Because I think all of us have said the size is crazy. And yet that's, what it is. And to me that just
so you understand, just to recap, it's a good recap for not only you, but the viewing audience. The size came from one place only, that they wanted to be able to treat them like they treated them in non-parkland, so in right away. Right now, you get a sign that says, your size is 24 square feet. They wanted to get the same thing, and then the group started looking at our signs, which are in compliance with that too. The ones you see right now that we've spent the nice dollars on are 24 square foot. We thought if we put them the same rotational direction, it would look similar, it would confuse people. That's why they turned it up on its side to have it more of a narrower and skinnier look. That way, if you were from the suburbs meeting your family at Ewing Park and you saw Easter Lake neighborhood, you might not think that's the park name, and you'd home in the wrong spot. So they wanted to make a separation between what those two signs looked like. Again, all your ideas can be in prevailing motion documented and sent forward. I'm going to take all these as that. That's what I need from you, is some kind of a motion that prevails that tells me how to go forward to City Council. They'll look at the ad hoc committee's recommendation and they'll see what you reacted to.
Vince?
And just with our concerns of being fair for those people that already have put neighborhood signs up for their neighborhoods, those folks didn't have the opportunity at that time to go out and find funds from a contributor because of the policy that was already on the zoning books. So your concern is admirable, but I don't find it to be any more relevant than the fact that if the sign's going to be in the park, it's going to have to go through that same zoning board that these other folks have already had to work through. And they're going to come back to you as being the director and your staff and say, how do you feel about this? If it's case by case, you've, through conversations with me, have said that there's one, possibly two or three neighborhood associations looking at doing this. Okay, 2 or 3 is fine. But then the other side of this is, you still haven't adequately answered what happens when the neighborhood association dissolves and the city's required by this ordinance to take out the sign because they have dissolved. Knowing what I know about neighborhood associations, they're not cash cows. They're people that get together for the betterment of their neighborhoods. They don't have large funds, and usually generally when they disappear, they're gone and they don't have funds left over. They've dispersed their funds into a charity or whatever they're going to do. So what we're doing is setting ourselves up as a park board to spend more money that we could use in better places, staff, wherever. So my concern is size, but also what happens if that happens? And nobody knows the future, like Joe said, but if that neighborhood association dissolves and then the city's required by this ordinance to take out the sign, where does that money come from?
It would be an operational expense of Lightning Parks Department or somewhere in the city.
It'll be coming out of our budget, which you hammer out and stress out over year after year as we're trying to stretch it further and further. So that's all I have.
Anybody else?
I still haven't heard anyone, staff or on the board, explain to me why they think it's fair to allow a for-profit car dealership to have their name as a donor and an individual to not have their name, or a church group or 4-H group.
Well, if I can jump in on that, and correct me if I go wrong, but I believe an individual is okay.
Not under the
Am I wrong?
reading we have there.
Joe, that's correct.
We allow individuals. We were trying to have these donors be as neutral as possible and family friendly as possible. So we didn't want to have advertisements of alcohol or tobacco. But if Mr. and Mrs. Johnson that lived in Beaverdale Park wanted to give to their sign, they could.
But a local 4-H group couldn't?
Local groups, and what did we say, local nonprofit groups, as long as they didn't have a message with it.
The names of religious, advocacy, or political organizations, brand names would be excluded.
So no brand names, no organizations that have a political tie or a lobbying effort tie. So you could have a 4-H group as long as they weren't 4-H sponsoring some environmental movement that was a lobbying effort.
So your local Keep Parks Green couldn't
couldn't be a donor? Because they're an advocacy group?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think that there's some interpretation in that policy that allows us a little bit of flexibility. Again, when I spoke with Ann and her team, it was reasonably limiting what we were trying to do. Again, it's not really in the expertise of the Park and Recreation staff to draft legal language, but we tried to make it what the committee wanted, which was to allow these neighborhoods to be able to fundraise without having to take away the neutrality of what we wanted in the park system without having to be offensive. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Lloyd.
Well, I'd like to reinforce what Lloyd said. You know, Ben has done a great job with all of this, but if you drive around town, you know, the vast majority of the neighborhood associations have signs up. Like, you know, the big brick signs, the Waterbury, you know, neighborhood association. And, you know, like I say, the vast majority of them, why do we need to add to that inside the park?
It all started from the proposal from the neighborhood. As you know, we didn't go out seeking to give up parkland for signs. That was the last thing on our priority list. They came to us with the idea. They particularly said, our neighborhood just doesn't have any land that works for us, but your park space is great. And we challenged them. We said, well, wait a second. The park is in the geographical center of your boundaries. Typically, you look for a highly traveled road on the outskirts, like a welcome to Des Moines sign, welcome to our neighborhood. That wasn't the case. And I think that goes to the point that, you know, there's not going to be an apples to apples comparison each time we have a sign come to our desk. In my office, you know, I know you've asked this, and I appreciate everybody's support, and I know you have our team's support, and you're all very passionate on this item, is that we really need a tool, because it's hard for me politically, as well as trying to raise money, to stand up against these neighbors and say that, no, you can't be a part of our team. That's what it feels like to them. I know that's not what you want to convey, but to them, it's like you're taking away something that belongs to us, our neighbor, our park. Even though we all know it's the whole city's park, I'm just telling you how they feel. And as we go forward, you brought up the budget. If I can't successfully fundraise and successfully have grassroots level efforts with the people that are using these parks more often than the regional basis, you have a little bit of a problem.
Well, are we putting in jeopardy a situation like Nettie's and at Waveland Blank, you know, and Grandview on the tee boxes, you know, 10th tee sponsored by, you know, which we have allowed Ned to do, and given him the authority to do that, which obviously we have the power to do that. But, you know, that's up to Ned, you know, who he sells it to, and I'm all for that. And I think it's a good situation, but, you know, you get on to the other side, and if I drive into Greenwood Park or any other park, I'm just saying again, the vast majority of the neighborhoods, as I drive around, I see their big sign announcing that is the so-and-so association. And so I say again, why do we need to go inside, you know? And it's like, didn't you get it, dummy? You just went into the so-and-so, you know, association's park, or the park located in so-and-so neighborhood association's area.
It's all just individual preference, I think, at the end of the day. And again, that's why it's nice to have a tool to enforce that. But I think Paul has a question.
Well, just a comment. I will be voting against this, and I'm not going to. Everybody's covered the issues, the size of the sign, you know, the ambiguities about sponsorship. But you mentioned that you wanted neighborhoods to feel free to participate in their parks, and I think all of us here would like that.
Absolutely.
But I guess I would just ask the neighborhoods to consider adopting a park and having a small sign adopted by the Meredith Neighborhood Association and putting $9,000 worth of flowers or whatever in the park. I know the Downtown Neighborhood Association, if you look over at the Asian Garden, there's one little brick that says Downtown Neighborhood Association, $5,000. There are lots of ways to contribute to parks. It's not an ownership thing. It's that the parks belong to everybody. And I guess that's my major problem with the large sign. I think there's a big difference between a right-of-way and a park. And I don't like the idea that we have these big signs. I understand you want them uniform, but I think a right-of-way is far different than a park, and they just shouldn't be that big. And there are other ways to contribute for the neighborhoods. They could get small plaques that indicate their contributions. There's a park foundation board they can contribute to. So I don't think it's fair to say we don't want them feeling ownership in the park, and they sure can contribute, because you said you're trying to raise money.
Absolutely.
Nothing about anything we do should ever make a neighborhood feel like they can't contribute either to the park foundation board or a specific park. They can do jungle, they can pay toward equipment, they can pay toward the shelters. There are lots of ways for them to use that $9,000. So I guess I would just put out a plea to them. To just consider, instead of having 3 or 4 24 square foot signs that are like they are in a right-of-way, which to me that's like apples and oranges. I don't even understand that comparison. But there are other ways for them to contribute, and we want their contributions. But I don't think it has to be a 24 square foot sign to do that. And so I will be voting against this, but again, we certainly appreciate all the participation from the neighborhood associations in their parks. They make them safe, they make them a wonderful place for everybody to be, and we need their involvement.
Okay, by the way, is there anybody in the audience who wants to address this? This is a public hearing.
Is there any way to,
First,
sorry,
let me
I'm sorry.
Make sure there's nobody in the audience who wants to come forward. Can't hear what you're saying. Oh, is there anybody in the audience who wants to address this? Okay, I don't see anybody volunteering from the audience, so okay, John, go ahead.
Is there any way, like you said, about breaking it out? Because I think sponsorship and naming and all that just seems like a completely different issue altogether. I mean, for one thing, who's to say these need to be permanent, names on the back? It could be 5-year agreements for a neighborhood association, and individual names could be, a lesser time, or for 10 years or something like that, and they're changed out. I'm sure there's got to be some way to do that. I mean, we're kind of talking about just a uniform look to a sign instead of here's the uniform look and here's a policy on what goes on it, which to me seem to be 2 different issues.
Yeah, I agree with you, John, that it's really not a park issue, the names of the donors. So if that's the one thing that's holding you up, then yeah, let's separate that out, isolate the problem. Does anybody else have anything they want to contribute? Okay, are we ready to have somebody make a motion?
Okay. I move the Park Signage Review Committee's proposed policy, with the exception of number 1G,
Which is the name policy.
which is the donor naming section of that policy, which can either be stripped out and voted on separately, but my motion is to strip that out, but approve the rest of the policy as presented.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, any further discussion on this motion?
I guess if you're going to move that, is there anybody on the board that likes the 24 square foot size of the signage? And if you're going to start picking out pieces we don't like, why isn't there a motion to have that to a sign of no longer than, strike it from 24 feet to 12 feet, 12 square feet?
Okay, Lloyd, procedurally, what you're proposing would be an amendment.
We're in the discussion phase, so I guess I'm suggesting that you may want to offer that as an amendment.
This proposal went to the neighborhood association. They were approving what they had before them, is that correct? So this would be something new for the neighborhood association
You
to
know,
look at?
likely I wouldn't take it back to the neighborhood association. I would just take your action and show them their action and show them the committee's work. And that way the council has an à la carte menu, if you will. They can say, here's the task force that we assigned to it, here's the 2 stakeholders that were very interested in this, and make a decision.
And this action today is to reflect what the park board thinks about it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't, that's all it represents, right?
Correct.
So I consider that friendly.
Could we even consider it less square foot than 12?
As I review the minutes of the meeting, the ad hoc committee meetings, the only thing I would respond is that you start getting it too small and they're gonna feel like it's not big enough. You know, part of this is to show off their neighborhood. So if you start getting it too small, then you're not meeting some of their objectives. Now, but that could, again, fall in favor of, if we approve this and they don't like it, then they won't use it. So it could fall into the no signs end up in our parks category. But I think, I'm just reflecting what I think the neighborhood people might say to that. But it's, you know, the city council's gonna make up their mind, and the city council will have opportunity to review those minutes, those discussions, and our reflections on this. So if, you know.
And some of these suggestions came from the 2 city council people that sat on the ad hoc committee, trying to form some compromise with the neighborhoods that were coming to us with sort of unreasonable signs. And we're hoping that we could come somewhere to their ideas and incorporate them.
Of course, they'll have the vote to do, those 2 people will have the option to look at what the neighborhood said, what the park board said, and make their decision. They're the final vote. So, I personally really appreciate the friendly amendment. And what size was your amendment?
I suggested 12 square feet.
I like 6.
Let
Let's
it be
try and keep
noted
it
that
orderly here. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and now there's been a proposed amendment, which exactly is what? Like, what is it?
State your amendment.
It would be to strike the language about 24 square feet and replace it with 12 square feet.
Okay, then I think I heard the person who made the motion, Marion, say that was friendly.
that would be
But I
friendly.
haven't heard from whoever made the second, and I don't know who that is.
I consider it friendly.
You made the second, Susan? Okay. So that's what we have on the floor right now. Is there any further discussion before we vote?
Are we voting on clarify we're voting on the amendment, not the?
First.
Well, if it's a friendly amendment, it becomes part of the motion.
Okay, so this is just one vote up or down on the whole thing.
Right, as stripping out the donor list problem, and also going to 12 square feet.
I'd almost prefer you split them into 2 votes. It seems to me that the agenda and the original motion was for or more properly would be for the original recommendation, and that Carol is bringing forward an amendment to change that 2 things. And we should vote on that first.
The amendment to your amendment?
Typically, in procedurally, when you have this proposed ordinance that's on the agenda, and that's technically what it should have been moved, and then Carol made an amendment or a friendly amendment to change it, and we should vote on that friendly amendment.
You made the amendment.
Okay, fine. You're in the chair.
So I just work here. The chair cannot make any motions. I just,
clarify what we're voting on, so we don't know.
all I can do is reflect people who've actually made a motion, well, including the motion to amend, and what's actually been done up to this point is we had the motion and a second to isolate, to vote on the package, except for stripping out the donor list thing. And then you made, you persuaded them to accept your friendly amendment to 12 square feet, and that's what we have on the floor right now.
Will we be voting on those things separately or just one vote?
Right now, it's just one vote.
Okay.
Okay, last call before we vote. And just to clarify one last time, what we're actually voting on is we're voting on the proposal, except that for two things: stripping out the donor list issue and also changing the 24 square feet to 12 square feet. That's what we're voting on. Last call for any comment.
Wouldn't it make a bigger impact to council if we also voted on those other two things? Separately, if we...
All I can do is what people have moved.
Okay, I'm good.
I can't make a motion or correct somebody else's motion.
Okay.
So. Last call. Okay, Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Galloway.
Yes.
Gelb.
Yes.
Vogel.
No.
Facto.
Yes.
Nolan.
Yes.
Cahill.
Yes.
Pasick.
Yes.
George.
No.
Scavo.
No.
Thornton.
No.
Feltner.
No.
Rogers.
Yes.
Okay, let me do my mathematics here. I have 5 no votes, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yes votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And let's just make sure we have 12 people voting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then Dan Pasick would be 12. So it works out. It's 7 yes and 5 no, so therefore the motion as amended passes.
Joe, you might want to, or staff, when you forward this, I'd suggest make clear that I think it was pretty clear the no votes were not in opposition to the changes in the recommendation to reduce the signage. It was, no vote against the idea as a whole. I wouldn't want them to go into a misimpression that the 5 no votes were in opposition to reducing the signage size or stripping the donor language out.
It might be additionally helpful if you might have a conversation too with your appointed council member, that would help too. And I'm going to work with the city manager. Right now, it looks like the first meeting in August, that's what we told the neighborhoods in this process. We would do it the first meeting in August with council. So I'll remind all of you when that gets here via Rebecca, a little email that will be on the agenda, so you'll have that opportunity to know about that then too.
Okay. Bill,
Larry.
may I have just a moment of personal time? I apologize. I need to go. I have another commitment, but I wanted to be here for the votes. So I think I'm going to miss something they may have going on for you. And I just want to take a moment and say that it has been my honor and my pleasure to serve on the park board with you. You've been an outstanding leader. Never once have we not had a quorum since you took over, and that has to do with the time you take and the calls you make, and just the commitment and the dedication that you have shown to the Parks Department. the people of Des Moines are lucky to have a citizen like you that's willing to take the time and make the effort. And you've made a huge difference in our park system, and I just want to say thank you for all your time and all your effort.
Well, thank you, Mary. It's been a pleasure.
So, and I'm sorry I had to kind of do this out of order, but I couldn't let you go without
Well, thank you.
saying that. So, and Carol, it's been great to get to know you. Don't be a stranger.
And before you scoot, is there any other business we need to do on the signs before we totally leave this? Any other loose ends you need tied up, Ben? This is your last chance to do something.
We have a lot of attorneys on our board, so if you ever need an expert witness on signage policy in the city, just give me a call and I will help you.
So in other words, you have what you need from us?
Yes, absolutely.
There's no loose ends about
No.
something else we need to vote on?
Rebecca's captured the minutes. I'm going to reflect that in the final council action for you. And I'll remind you again.
Okay. We're done with signs then.
Yay.
Okay, and then, Marion, thank you for coming for this. I know you had to leave something to come to this. I appreciate that. And the same goes for Dan. I know you've got your hands full, Dan. Thanks for taking the time to participate by phone. I know you've got things to do, so if you want to sign off now, that's fine. Of course, you're welcome to listen into the rest of the meeting too. It's totally up to you, but thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and drop out here and go ahead and do what I need to do. But I thank you, everybody, for being patient with me with what I've got going on. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thanks, Marion. Okay. Now, let's regroup and figure out where we're at. We're done with the voting. It looks like the next thing will be Ben's report.
Absolutely. If the board would allow us, I'd like to let the Wave and Cart Storage Project go next. We do have a speaker here, and I know that he gets to get back to running some golf courses, but that's okay. All right, we'll have Matt introduce it, and Ned will be up in a second on the Wayland Cart Storage Project.
Chairman Galloway, members of the Park and Recreation Board, I'm Matt Salvatore, Interim Recreation Manager. In a moment, I'll introduce Ned from C Corporation to discuss improvements at Waveland Golf Course. Ned's contract for private operation of the golf courses requires him to do capital improvements. These capital improvements are in his contract. They were approved by council. This particular improvement is the highest profile of all of them. And a little background on where this project is at. It's been approved by Citizen Golf Committee on May 23rd after a public meeting. We had 4 citizens that attended that public meeting, didn't have any major concerns. They were worried about the impact on trees, which there are none. It was unanimously approved by the Access Advisory Board, and it went through a preliminary review for the Urban Design and Review Board. And we also received a letter of recommendation from the Waveland neighborhood regarding this project. So I'll introduce, this is Ned Chido from C Corporation. He's going to discuss this project and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Matt. I don't know if you know this or not, but you guys could have seceded from the Union and we couldn't have heard you. But anyhow.
Probably fortunate then.
The golf course project, as you can see on the screen, is basically a aesthetics project as well as a project that improves the functionality of the facility. Right now, we park our golf carts inside a enclosed chain link fence on an asphalt pad. The footprint is almost identical to the footprint you see in the picture. We're basically going to dig underneath it, go into the bank, and I think the visual would be something similar to a walkout basement with a pre-stressed concrete deck on top as the roof. It will be at grade level, so there will be no change in elevation. It'll be a flat area that we can use both for staging carts and using it to provide seating and space that can be used by groups that want to conduct an outside event. For instance, the one that comes to mind that will be holding it, Waveland here shortly, would be Jazz in July. It would provide the neighborhood a very good platform to conduct that event in a very nice setting. The structure on top is basically a pavilion kind of structure, and it's a stage 2 kind of project. The bottom part is a definite. The top part is a maybe, depending on what it costs to do the bottom and how much controversy it stirs up with the different various departments in the city. Right now, we're having some discussion over the aesthetics of the pavilion. If it becomes cost prohibitive and pushes it outside our budget, that will be eliminated. But hopefully, we can get everything going and stay within our budget, and it'll end up being as you see it. Be happy to answer any questions or.
For those of you that don't make it out to Waveland Golf Course very often, it's a much needed aesthetic improvement, even if you back out the open air shelter on top, which I'm a fan of and not required, just to verify that with you. In his proposal, he was required, and council adopted his contract to build the cart compound. Right now, it's all asphalt in and around, so his project right there shows you the new deck, but even around the clubhouse is asphalt. It's failing, to be real honest. It's cracked, and you can see grass growing up through it, and it's just not the best system. Of our 3 clubhouses, it's our smallest for interior spaces, so this will allow more functions to be happening there, more community services and neighborhood meetings, and it's a good for Ned's operation as well, but a lot of good things going on here. So on behalf of staff, we're very supportive of the program, and we're working our way through the city system.
The Neighborhood Association has talked about it at several of their meetings and has seen it, and I think I'm not overstating it, is pretty excited about having this. And it fits in with our long-term plan of making a connection between the Waveland Golf Course facility and the neighborhood. I think for many years, there's been a total disconnection between the golf course. It was here and the neighborhood was there, and unless you played golf, you really never visited the facility. And we're trying to bridge that and make a connection so that it becomes an integral part of the neighborhood, and they think of it in terms of a meeting facility, a recreation facility, and more of a neighborhood functioning facility than just a golf course. We think this will improve the aesthetics of the whole area around the clubhouse dramatically.
Carol?
Citizens Golf Committee was also very much in favor and on board with this as well.
Seems like a great concept. How's this funded?
It's actually funded through Ned's operation, so we like it even more.
Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
No, I was asking where was the funding coming from?
It comes out of my pocket.
Okay.
That's why we're concerned about the cost.
Okay.
We run it through not only the appropriate city boards, but also our internal engineering department, because at the end of the contract, all improvements become property of the city, and we want to make sure that they're built to those same standard. And he's been working through all those things. He's been meeting all the codes and meeting with the building permit officials. He gets permits just like anybody else would. So.
No questions. Thank you very much.
Great concept. Nice job, Ned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Ned. Thanks for the report.
All right. Let me go to the top of my list now.
Sure.
Thank you. We're going to have your Did You Know next, Bates Park by Barb Baker.
Good evening, Chairman Galloway and members of the Park and Recreation Board, and a pre-welcome to George. I am Barb Baker. I am a programming supervisor with Des Moines Park and Recreation, and I'm here tonight to do your Did You Know on Bates Park. Bates Park lies on a plateau overlooking the Des Moines River. It has an interactive playground, swing set, an area of open space, an area for softball, soccer, or running games such as Tag Your It and relay games. The interactive playground has a speaking tube that you talk into and hear it all the way at the other side of the playground, approximately 30 feet away. The day I took these pictures, the adults in the park wanted to show me all the neat ways you could use the interactive playground. There weren't any children there. I did visit the park several times so that I could get a good feel for Bates Park. You can see by the picture on the right that there were children there one day when I visited, and the play area in the pool has always been very popular. It's a great addition to the park. You can see by the children playing in it, they use toys and interactive things in the pool area too. Softball was played regularly at Bates, and in 1953, the Trinity team won the city championship. In the early 1900s, a pavilion, wading pool, and playground equipment were added. In 1960, the Dutch elm disease took their grove of Dutch elm trees. In the early 2000s, the interactive playground equipment was added, and it was designed with area school children, and they assisted and helped with everything on it. A memorial plaque in the memory of Clara Baker and Phyllis King, who lived in the neighborhood close to Bates, was installed. Curtis was born in Connecticut. At the age of 3, his family moved to Ohio. At 24, he ran for election in the Ohio Senate, and his opponent complained that he wasn't 25 yet. As he was complaining, Curtis turned 25 and therefore was unanimously elected to the Ohio Senate. Socially, the judge was eminent for his virtues, integrity in business affairs, fidelity in friendship, purity of life, and loyalty to the home of his adoption, whatever was to be for the betterment of civic life. Curtis purchased the land now known as Bates Park in 1860. The public used the northern portion along the bluff overlooking the river as a part of it, and that was known as Bates Park. Then in 1879, Judge Curtis Bates dies of smallpox. Lee Barber was known as the King of the Grill. Previous National Night Out functions were always held at Bates Park. Lee would stay at the grill the whole evening as the grill master. We are currently working together with the neighborhood River Bend membership, donating funds for the project of a grill in memory of Lee Barber. I thank you. Any questions?
Okay, outstanding report, Barb. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On Ward is next to give you a little update on the flooding we've had over the last month, and I'll steal a little of his thunder today. We were proud to open up the water at Grays Lake finally after our bacteria test allowed us. So just this afternoon, we opened up the water part of Grays Lake.
Chairman Galloway, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Ron Ward, Park Manager, and just give you a little update. The flooding that we had at the end of May, began in June, was after your last park board meeting, so we wanted to just let you know some things. We actually lucked out and we didn't have too many issues. We did have Grays Lake closed. We closed the whole park. The water got up high enough where you couldn't use the water also in the beach, and it was on the trail and on the road. We closed it on May 28th and then reopened the park on June 10th. And the beach and the water facilities, we opened back up on the 13th. And we had some minor cleanup to do, and Public Works helped us out by sweeping the road and the trail for us. And then our heavy equipment guys, they had to do a little bit of work on the trail, the Meredith Trail. We also had to close Simon Estes because the water was clear up to the stage on that. Fortunately, the only thing damage we had there is we had to have some electrical outlets repaired, which is normal procedure after we have the flooding. So the whole west side then of the Riverwalk was closed. And that was closed basically from about May 28th until we reopened it on, the amphitheater was reopened on the June 8th and the trail on the 10th. And there again, the Riverwalk was reopened. We did some work on cleaning it up, and Operation Downtown also helped doing some cleanup work. Those were the only parks that were really affected. Trail-wise, the Walnut Creek Trail from North Valley Drive to Bill Riley Trail was closed for a while. The Bill Riley Trail from Ashworth Park to Waterworks Park. The Meredith Trail, as I just said, from along Fleur Drive north of Grays Lake to Southwest 16th. And the Des Moines River Trail, which is the new section, that was closed from 14th Street to Southeast 22nd Street. And the trail along Birdland Drive was closed, and that's still closed. It keeps getting, this latest rain event, it was starting to get close, and now it's still under, parts of it are still underwater. And so on some of those trails, the only thing we had to do was some cleanup. They get some mud and debris left on them, and our heavy equipment crew did the cleanup work on those, on getting those cleaned off, and then our park crew would go through with the sweeper and once it dried and get it all cleaned up. So, any questions?
Are the bike trails all cleared? See none left? Any of the?
Yeah, as far as I know, they've all been cleaned off, except like I said, that trail along Birdland there is still closed, which is part of the Neil Smith Trail.
The new South Des Moines Trail that goes from
Yeah.
over here by Mullets to County Soccer, that's not under ownership by the state.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that.
But we do call the contractor, it's still on the punch list phase of being accepted, so they've been very helpful and responsive.
Yeah, they did the
Cleaning
cleanup work
This
on that.
morning, I rode that and it was clean. They
Yeah,
had
the
scooped it
contractor's
off.
been responsible for cleaning that since, as Ben said, we haven't accepted it yet.
It's good to know this clean, though, thank you.
Yeah, they did a good job. Lots of mosquitoes.
I think it's good that, too, that just as board members, as you run into your friends and families that use facilities like Grays Lake, you know that we've closed it, but you could drive by, see people using it. It's just a resource issue for not only our department, but the police department to kick them out of there. It's just not safe to be in there when the water's over the trail. It's not that you're going to drown or fall in, it's just that it's carrying a high level of bacteria. We had to educate the public a lot on, even pets, not safe for your pet or you. We saw people pushing their kids and strollers through the floodwater. Absolutely a health issue. So if they're listening on TV or you see them, that's why we close. We don't close because it's this much water. We don't want to close.
Other questions or comments relating to Ron's report? Okay, thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Great job. Keep up the good work.
Jen is coming up to talk about our second annual National Parks and Recreation Month event. And this is where, Carol, you'll go down famous in our book for pushing us to do this. And this is honest, and we thank you for doing that. For those who don't know, Carol always asks us why we didn't have a signature event to celebrate the month of Parks and Recreation. And so after a couple of years of her asking that question, we finally came up with that idea. So thank you, and this is something that will go down in your legacy. So
The idea is surpassed my
Well-
expectations.
we can't give our team anything small. We can't do anything small.
Very nice.
Chairman Galloway, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Jennifer Fletcher, Marketing Supervisor, and as Ben has already introduced us, we're here to talk about Park and Recreation Month event that we're hosting this year. And you should all have, I put up a little invitation so you have the details, but I have just a few more items to share. We put together a little promo video for the event, as you've seen us do in the past, so I just want to share that with you now.
July is National Park and Recreation Month, and Des Moines wants to celebrate with you. It's all happening Saturday, July 13th on the Court Avenue Bridge. From 7 a.m. to noon, you can play games, win prizes, and learn more about the programs and activities of Des Moines Parks and Recreation. It's fun for all ages Saturday, July 13th, as we celebrate National Park and Recreation Month on the Court Avenue Bridge.
So some of those images may look familiar to those of you who attended last year. Whoa, sorry. I've already seen that one. So once again, we're inviting citizens to come out, enjoy our interactive displays. We're looking at about having 25 different booths, just displaying the areas of the park system, including disc golf, aquatics, tennis, bocce ball, trails, soccer, pickleball, and a whole lot more. So we're inviting people to come out and play games. They can win prizes, and really the whole point of it is just learn more about everything we do, so that, as Ben said before, we don't hear anymore, I didn't know you did that. So we're moving yoga downtown, so yoga in the park will become yoga at the hub. We really want to have everything down there at the bridge that day. We're hoping to have demonstrations from the Des Moines Police Department with their canine division in the dog park section, and groups from our Dancing at the Lake series to come out and talk about that event. We've partnered with the iCubs, the Des Moines Historical Society, as well as the Heritage Carousel to join us this year. And as we've said, it's only in its second year, but this has really become an event that every part of our department has embraced and volunteered, and they're very excited about putting it on again. So, any questions?
It was a great event last year, and it was great fun to be on the bridge and
It was
talking to
fun.
people. People would be at the farmer's market, and they'd say, is this more farmer's market? And it was like, no, this is the parks. And they were like, oh, we had no idea there was so much. It's just a great morning, so if you can come, please do. Spread the word.
And if you are interested, I'm taking t-shirt sizes. So I will be sending out an email. Just those of you who do want to help out and volunteer, I'll need your shirt size. So.
One thing we're going to do for the board members is, if you participate, we're going to ask that you help us with information. We'll provide this to you on the value of what we do. We've developed some really nice items that talk about that $70 amount of what you get. So they're quick, you can hand them out and talk to people, because it's important. We've got a captive audience, and we want people to know how valuable we are and why Des Moines is a great place, and we're one of the major reasons we really believe that.
Okay, other questions for Jen? Okay, super job, Jen. Keep it up. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks. I'm going to just draw your attention to one last item. I thought in your packet was something new, but Jen's done a great job as always. She put a little marketing report for the month, just something you can look at. Hopefully you saw it. I think it's nice for you to see all the things we're doing each month and how many people we're reaching in her world. So good report on that too. That's all I have.
Okay, questions for Ben about his report or about anything for that matter? Okay, good report, Ben. You're doing a super job.
Joe?
Okay, next we'll move on to the report of the chair. Item number 1, next meeting, July 31st. Not the normal time because of RAGBRAI. It's July 31st, 5 o'clock here. Okay, secondly, cemetery committee appointment. It has been proposed that Carolyn Rogers be appointed as the park board representative to the cemetery committee. Does anybody have any objection or questions or comments about that? Okay, Carolyn, I hereby appoint you.
Thank you.
Okay, appointment to the golf committee. It's been proposed that Vince Scavo take that appointment. Does anybody have any objections or comments about that?
We're thrilled.
Okay, Vince, I hereby appoint you. Thanks for
my understanding. There's no requirement to be a good golf player.
There's a hammer.
Clearly not.
No.
Carol and Paul already proved that. We're all right, so.
All right.
Okay, one last thing from the chair. I saved the best part for last. Now, this involves, what was your name? Carol George. Let's see now, who's got the sheet?
That is nice.
Okay, Carol, do you want to come
Get your
down here?
picture.
Yes. She does. She's got more.
That is right.
Yes, my wife gets all the credit. Amy
Very
did
nice.
a great job.
Yeah,
So
very
she's
nice.
right there, so we can thank her. Okay, I'd like to read this to Carol, who is completing her victory lap here. It says, Des Moines Park and Recreation Board proclamation to honor Carol George. Whereas Carol George has been a valuable member of the Des Moines Park and Recreation Board for over 8 years with perfect attendance. And
I
where-
wondered if it was perfect. I wasn't positive, but.
I'll give you an affidavit. And whereas Carol George has served as board vice president and as a member of the executive committee for many years, and whereas Carol George has gone far above and beyond the call of duty by serving on committees whenever asked, and has been a reliable and valuable member of the Golf, Budget, and Trails and Greenways committees. And I forgot to add also the Camping Committee, we talked about that. And whereas Carol George has been the inspiration and driving force behind the celebration of July as National Parks Month in Des Moines, which we were just talking about. Now therefore, Carol George, on this 25th day of June 2013, your fellow board members and the park staff wish you a big thank you for your many contributions.
Thank you.
You've been a terrific member. So I'm very proud to present this to you.
Joe, there's another plaque right there for you.
Right, yeah, let's get a picture with this.
Yep, right there, upside down.
Thanks.
You're not done, Carol. We also have a certificate of appreciation. You want me to come over here so we can see it on TV? Is awarded to Carol George in recognition of your dedicated years of leadership and service to the Park and Recreation Board and your loyal support of the Park and Recreation Department. Signed, Ben Page, Director.
Thank you.
I'm very proud to present that to you.
Thank you.
And they're not quite done.
Oh, boy.
This is from the mayor. City of Des Moines Certificate of Recognition presented to Carol George for faithful and unselfish service as a member of the Park and Recreation Board, presented this 30th day of June 2013, Franklin County Mayor.
Cool. Thank you.
It's
It
well
really has
deserved.
been a pleasure to serve with the staff, the board. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you. You've been a terrific member. Let's give her a standing ovation. Now we're ready for a couple of pictures. Or do you need two more?
That's for Joe.
Okay, everybody disperses. Everybody come down.
No, I hate to wait.
Come on down, y'all.
Oh,
Board, pictures.
oh, gosh.
It's okay. You're part of the family now. It's right there. Being late.
Okay, photographer, you tell us we're all in the picture or
Everybody's happy.
give it 1, 2, 3 cheese.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, Carol.
We have one, okay, let's go all stand here, we have one more.
Before Joe slips away, we have a certificate of appreciation for Joe for his 14 years of service. And we want to highlight some things that he's done, like reviving Friends of the Parks and bringing all the counties around to the trails and greenways, and you and Keane's wonderful donations to the park. So we didn't want us to say much, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And we couldn't send everybody away without a little, knowing Joe's sweet tooth and Carol. We have a little cupcake reception for you. Oh. Yes.
I'm going to give Joe a standing ovation because, Joe, you honored him for many, many years.
Certainly been a pleasure. adjourn, let's go back and,
I make a motion.
does anybody else have anything? They want, okay,
Thank you, Joe.
Vince's made a motion, is there a second?
It has to go to the golf courses, practice.
Okay, Moines seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
All right.